Thank you, Dr. Lee. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Marckini, and I am a recovering engineer. I mention this only to put in perspective the amount of effort I expended and the rather unconventional approach I used to analyzing my treatment alternatives almost 13 years ago when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Folks here asked me if I would tell you a little bit about who we are, how we got started, what's our mission, what have we been up to, and some information on feedback from our membership. My journey actually began 2 years before I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. My older brother was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 1998. And his urologist suggested surgery, and he went with his urologist's suggestion. And he asked me if I would drive him to the hospital, which I did. My brother was 6'1", picture of health, and very, very good physical condition. And 4 hours later, I was with him in the recovery room. And what I saw in the recovery room scared me to death. He had lost 6 pints of blood. He had tubes and drains and catheters. And as he lay there, he looked to me like he was near death. I knew that I was at risk for prostate cancer, so I made a promise to myself that if I'm ever diagnosed with prostate cancer, I'm going to find something better than surgery. Sure enough, 2 years later, I was diagnosed, and that's when I took the gloves off and started my due diligence. And I did what most patients do. I started out researching the internet, downloading everything I could find, reading it twice. I had stacks of information on surgery and seeds and cryo and external beam conformal radiation and so on. And I also started interviewing doctors representing each of the various treatment modalities. And the more of this I did, the more confused I became, because each of the doctors told me that I was the poster boy for what he had to offer. How could I be the poster boy for seeds and surgery and cryo and external beam? It just didn't make sense to me. So I made a decision to refocus my due diligence and to start talking with the customer, the patients. At first I had trouble getting to the patients because the doctors didn't want me to speak with their patients. Now this was pre-HIPAA, this was before HIPAA implementation. But I did manage to find a few patients, and once I found a few, I could find more because they had friends, acquaintances, whatever. I literally interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of men who had these various treatments. In the process of doing this, I stumbled on something called proton beam radiation therapy. It sounded too good to be true. I learned that it was only being delivered at Loma Linda University Medical Center in Southern California, and I called them up, and we had a little discussion about it, and I said, I'd like to speak with former patients. And they said, sure, we'll send you a list of 30 names. And that really blew me away. All the others were trying to shield me from their patients, and Loma Linda was proud of it. So they faxed me a list of 30 names, and I reached 20 of the people on that list, and through them another 36. So I interviewed 56 former proton patients. And what I heard from these guys was so different from what I heard from the other 80 or 90 that I interviewed, in terms of their treatment experience, their quality of life after treatment, their disease was in remission, and so on. It just sounded too good to be true. So I've got to get out there and see this place firsthand. So I flew out there, spent about 2.5 days, wandering through the hallways, interviewing patients in treatment, sat in on all the meetings, the social meetings and support group meetings and all the rest. The Wednesday night meeting there, 150 cancer patients sitting around laughing and having a blast. And then I met with my doctor, happens to be here, Dr. Carl Rossi, and he answered every one of my 736 questions. I made the decision that I was going to have this treatment. I called my wife and I said, honey, we're going to be spending a couple of months in California, pack your bags. And we did. We had the best vacation of our lives. Proton patients often refer to it as their radiation vacation, and the results were beyond my expectations. Now, those of you who are familiar with blood PSA levels, This is the kind of chart you want to have if you've been treated for prostate cancer. It doesn't get much better than this. This is a picture of me in treatment, and it was a piece of cake. Lasted about 15 minutes. No pain, no discomfort, no invasion of my body, no anesthesia, none of that stuff. 15 minutes later, I was out. I was free to go. Now, when my friends and family members back home heard that I had chosen this, quote, alternative experimental treatment called proton beam radiation therapy in, of all places, Southern California, they had visions that I was undergoing something like this. And they were sending me get well cards and flowers, and they had visions of me losing hair and getting thinner and so on and so forth. I was feeling guilty because I was doing this every day. My wife and I would play golf, tennis, go hiking, on the weekends, go to the beach. It really was a radiation vacation. So the Brotherhood of the Balloon, how did we get started? While I was in treatment, I met up with a few other proton geeks, as I refer to them. They were physicists and scientists and engineers, and one was, again, a chemistry professor from Vermont. And we compared notes, and we had a lot of fun talking about our due diligence. But one of the things we knew was that you don't walk out the door after any radiotherapy treatment cured of your cancer. The way the mechanism works is the radiation damages the DNA and the cell structure, and your cancer cells are programmed to die. The doctors call this apoptosis. And that could happen a year, 2 years, 3 years later. So we knew that our PSAs were going to be dropping, and we knew that there was a chance we might have some side effects. So we figured, let's compare notes and see how each of us are doing over time. So we formed an informal fraternity, something like the Robin Williams movie, The Dead Poets Society. The 6 of us were going to do it. No one else was going to know about it. Well, there was somebody else at the hospital by the name of Dr. Lynn Martell, who happens to be sitting right over here. He's in charge of special services there. And he saw what we were doing, and he knew that this was far more than 6 guys who wanted to stay in touch with each other. He saw this as an extension of the Loma Linda Make Man Whole mission, an extension of their psychosocial programs, an extension of their patient support programs, and he knew that that would be good for patients. So he encouraged others to join our group. And when I left treatment, we happened to have 19 members in our group, and I remember saying to my wife on the plane on the way back, I'm not sure I signed up for all this. Well, what's happened since then? This is our growth over the past 12 and a half years. We now have 6,400 members of this group, the Brotherhood of the Balloon. And please don't ask me to explain where that name came from. I look at this chart, I can't help but wish that my investment portfolio looked like this. But sadly, it looks more like my PSA chart. Some information on the demographics of our group. We have 6,400 members, ranging in age from early 30s, believe it or not, to almost 100. And they also represent all cancer stages, from early stage garden variety prostate cancer to advanced aggressive localized disease. All these statistics are important when you start hearing information about the surveys in a few minutes. Members come from all 50 US states, 33 different countries, and they were treated at all 10 US proton centers plus 3 proton centers in Europe and Asia. We have members in our group that were treated every year since Loma Linda opened their doors in 1990. So that's 23 years of representation in our group. Over 50% of our members were treated more than 5 years ago, and about 20% were treated more than 10 years ago. So our group represents somewhere in excess of 50% of the men today who were treated with proton therapy for prostate cancer. What is our mission? It's a 3-part mission. It started out with 6 guys who wanted to stay connected with each other and provide support, information, and so on. We added a second component because we realized that about 0.1% of the men diagnosed with prostate cancer were discovering this technology. We wanted to take the show on the road and promote this technology that did us such a great favor. And we also wanted to provide support for proton therapy research So we added the last component, giving something back. How do we do all these things? We started out with a member database, 22 pieces of data on each of our members, about 140,000 pieces of data now. It's on the internet, password protected, and available to our members only. So they can go there at any time, sort the member list, and find people who were treated in their state, people who are the same pre-treatment cancer stage, and a number of other connections that would allow them to touch bases with people that have been through this treatment. We also started writing a monthly newsletter, about a 20-page comprehensive newsletter about the latest developments on proton technology, new proton centers opening up, health and nutrition, diet and lifestyle for preventing a recurrence of your prostate cancer, and so on and so forth. We also have an internet presence. Our website sees several thousand visitors a month, and we also have social media representation. We have a Facebook page and a blog. These are the home pages for our website, our blog, and Facebook. And I encourage you to go there and visit it. There's a ton of information there. A lot of people learn about proton therapy through these media. We also prepared a PowerPoint presentation, something that would allow our members to take the show on the road. It's a detailed presentation, very comprehensive, that talks about prostate cancer awareness, detection, treatment alternatives, pros and cons, with a focus, of course, on proton therapy. At any one day during the year, we have members standing up in front of groups, whether it's Lions Club meetings, Rotary Club meetings, church groups, support meetings, talking about prostate cancer awareness, the treatment options, and proton therapy. We also encourage our members to write letters to the editor anytime they see something where they believe they need to have the record set straight by a former patient that's been through it. I mentioned earlier that speaking with former patients for me made all the difference in the world. It convinced me that this was right for me. So we decided to go with some reference lists. We started out with a standard reference list, more than 100 names of former patients that welcome phone calls and emails. But since that time, we've added 27 more reference lists. Airline pilots like to talk to airline pilots. People from Canada like to talk to people from Canada. Men who have a single or a bilateral hip replacement are being told by their urologist that they're not candidates for radiotherapy. Well, we've got about 30 or 40 guys in our group that would disagree, and so on. So we've got 28 reference lists. We do fundraising. We initiate at least one major project each year, and I'm proud to say that we just finished a project in December where we funded an endowed chair for proton therapy research at Loma Linda. We have a number of reunions, 10 to 20 formal reunions every single year around the country, and probably another 15 or 20 informal reunions held in local communities by our members who are just staying in touch with their friends who have been through treatment. And there's much more that we do. The result of all of these things is, I mentioned earlier that most of the men in the world who have been treated with protons for prostate cancer are in our group. We have members that are educated and informed. They know a lot more about their technology than those who are treated by other modalities do. We've introduced thousands of patients through taking our show on the road to proton therapy. Many have found their way to proton centers that are represented in this room. We become a voice in the proton world, a force that can be brought to bear when there are attacks on proton therapy, or when folks like members of an earlier panel are starting to talk about denying reimbursement. And we've raised $9 million for proton therapy research. In terms of some feedback from our members on patient satisfaction, I think the existence of our group is testimony to the fact that men who choose proton therapy for prostate cancer are pretty happy about their treatment. One fellow about a year ago who joined our group, I met with his urologist to tell him that he was choosing proton therapy and not going with surgery, which his urologist recommended. And the urologist said, "How come you're going to go with proton therapy?" And he said, "That's the only treatment that has a fan club." We get feedback every single day, 365 days a year from our members, and it's overwhelmingly positive. We've done a couple of surveys. You're going to be hearing in detail about one from Joan in a few minutes. We did one before that, not quite as scientific, but we did it in 2009. And won't go into it in detail. These are 4 slides out of about 20 from the survey, but I think you could see how patients feel about proton therapy when you look at some of these curves. 99% report that they feel they made the best decision for themselves and would recommend proton therapy to others. And in terms of their treatment experience and likely to recommend and all the rest. This one here is one of the most interesting statistics. 97% of the respondents said that the quality of their life after treatment is same as or better than before treatment. I think it's phenomenal. And that also bears out with the survey that Joan will be talking about. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't use this opportunity to shamelessly promote my book. This is the book that I wish had been available to me when I was diagnosed. It's about my journey. It's about understanding the diagnosis, PSA, free PSA, Gleason score, TNM staging, and all the rest in layman's terms, and also about the pros and cons of each of the treatment options as I learned about them through my surveys, why I believe proton is best for localized cancer, and the 10 steps for taking control of your prostate cancer. The book is now distributed by 7 proton centers in the U.S., and I know from feedback I get from patients, members who join our group, that the book for many of them was instrumental in their choosing proton therapy, and nothing makes me happier than that. If you do a search on Amazon on the subject of prostate cancer, you'll discover there are 24,400 books available. I'm glad I didn't start my due diligence this year. We have been number 10, we have been in the top 10 on that list for the past 6 years, and we're currently number 4. And feedback that we get from readers, if you go on Amazon and read the reader reviews, you'll see that it's overwhelmingly positive. We do have a second edition of the book in the works and hope to have it out by the end of this year. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be questions later on.